The sun had begun to set over the small, once thriving town of Briarwood when a group of demolition workers uncovered something unexpected. Amid the crumbling bricks and splintered wood of an old, abandoned house, a hidden compartment revealed an object that seemed as out of place as it was forgotten. An ancient, dusty diary. The house had long been scheduled for demolition. Its once vibrant Victorian facade was now a shadow of its former self, a forgotten relic of a time that no longer mattered. But the diary, despite its age, looked untouched. It was bound in dark leather, the edges worn smooth from years of neglect, and there was something unsettling about the faint symbol embossed on the cover. It wasn't a family crest or a recognizable emblem, but a shape, a twisted, intertwining knot that seemed almost too deliberate, as though it was meant to draw attention. Yet, in the bustling chaos of demolition, the workers hardly paused to give it a second thought. After all, it was just an old book, the kind you could expect to find in such a place. It was Marco, a younger worker with a keen sense of curiosity, who first noticed the oddity of it. He brushed away the dust from its surface, his fingers lingering on the intricate pattern. It wasn't just the book's age that struck him. There was something about it, something faintly off, felt wrong even before he opened it. He tucked the diary under his arm and made his way to the small trailer they were using as an office. No one paid much attention to him. After all, it was just another discarded relic, a curiosity that would probably sit forgotten with the rest of the items found among the debris. But Marco couldn't shake the feeling that this diary was more than it seemed. As he sat down, he opened the cover and began flipping through the yellowed pages. The first few entries seemed mundane, the kind of daily scribblings one might expect in a diary. But as Marco continued to read, something unsettled him. The handwriting was delicate, almost too precise, but there was an underlying sense of urgency in the slanted strokes. And the more he read, the more the words seemed to bleed into one another, creating an eerie sense of disjointedness. I saw her again today, the woman in the mirror. She doesn't speak, but I know what she wants. I can feel it. Tomorrow I'll try to find out more. Maybe I'll follow her, or maybe she'll follow me. I don't know anymore. The entry was dated 1953. The unease Marco felt continued to grow, and with it came a faint but nagging sense of something else. Something sinister. Who was this woman in the mirror? And why was the diarist so obsessed with her? Marco was hooked. He couldn't put the book down. The next few entries were similarly cryptic, but they contained subtle clues that hinted at something darker lurking beneath the surface. The house is quieter now. I'm not sure who lives here anymore. The walls seem to move when I'm not looking, and the smell. It's stronger than before. I feel like I'm not alone, but every time I turn around, there's nothing. I hear them, the whispers. They're in the walls. The writing became more erratic, the sentences longer, more difficult to decipher. But there was something strange about the way the entries were phrased. The diarist was clearly experiencing emotional turmoil, a sense of increasing dread. But there was something about the words that made Marco feel as though the writer wasn't just living through a haunting. They were actively being drawn into something far worse. I followed the shadows tonight. They led me to the door, but I couldn't open it. They want me to open it. They need me to, but I'm afraid. I'm so afraid. I've heard her voice again, calling me from the dark. She wants me to come. She's waiting. This was no ordinary diary. Marco could feel his pulse quicken as he continued reading, the tension in the entries building as the diarist seemed to get pulled deeper into whatever dark mystery they were unraveling. But it was the next entry that truly made Marco's heart stop. I found the door. It opened for me tonight, but I don't know what's on the other side. I'm scared, but I must go. The whispers, they've promised me something. They said they would give me what I wanted. What I've always wanted. As Marco read that line, a shiver ran down his spine. He felt as though he was reading something that wasn't meant for him, as though he had stumbled upon a piece of history that had long been buried for a reason. But he couldn't stop reading. The entries continued, each more frantic than the last. The diarist's mental state seemed to deteriorate, and it became clear that whatever force was behind this diary wasn't just a figment of imagination. The writer had uncovered something terrifying, something alive, something that had a hold on them. I did it. I opened the door. But it wasn't what I thought it would be. The shadows were waiting for me. She was waiting for me. And now I can never leave. I am her, and she is me. The final entry was the most disturbing. It was dated only a day after the previous one. The handwriting was barely legible, and the words seemed to trail off, as if the diarist had been interrupted mid-sentence. She took me. I've become part of the house now. I can hear them in the walls, whispering. The shadows are mine now. The door is open, but it's not a door anymore. It's a cage. I will wait for the next one. I will wait. Marco closed the diary with shaking hands, his mind racing. He had no idea what he had just read, but the chilling sense of something unfinished, something terrifying, gnawed at him. The book seemed to hold secrets that no one was meant to uncover, and yet here he was, in possession of it. What was this house? What was the door? And who, or what, had the diarist become? The sound of the wind howling outside pulled Marco from his thoughts. He looked down at the pages again, then at the old house beyond the window. The house, now condemned to be torn down, had a dark history, one that was more than just the memories of those who lived there. The shadows, the whispers, the woman in the mirror. Was the house cursed? Had the diarist's fate been sealed long ago? And was Marco now entwined in it, too? As the workers gathered their things to leave for the day, Marco stood by the window, looking out at the now quiet house. The diary was no longer just an object, it was a warning. A warning about things that had been left forgotten, buried for a reason, things that had never truly been put to rest. A small, unsettling thought began to form in Marco's mind, one he couldn't shake. He glanced back at the diary, half hidden in his bag. The haunting words of the final entry echoed in his mind. I will wait for the next one. Was he the next one? Or was he merely the one to unearth this forgotten discovery? Marco could hardly sleep that night. The words from the diary echoed in his mind, lingering like a dark shadow over him. As much as he tried to dismiss them, he couldn't escape the overwhelming sense that something had been unleashed the moment he opened that book. His curiosity was now a weight, pressing down on him with each passing minute. The next morning, Marco made his way back to the house. The crew was scheduled to continue with the demolition, but Marco knew he had to return. There was something about the house that called to him, a pull, like a whisper from the shadows, urging him to uncover more. He had to know who the diarist was, what had happened to them, and, most importantly, what the house was hiding. The house stood in silent defiance of the workers' heavy machinery, as if it were trying to protect its secrets. As Marco approached the front door, a cold gust of wind swept past him, carrying with it the faint smell of decay. The feeling of unease deepened, but he couldn't turn back now. He stepped inside, his footsteps creaking on the old wooden floorboards. The walls seemed to watch him, and for a moment, Marco swore he could hear faint whispers in the corners of the room. Shaking off the sensation, he headed straight for the basement door. He had to know what lay beneath. When he descended the narrow staircase, the air grew colder, and the familiar buzz of fluorescent lights flickered overhead. The space felt oppressive, as though the very walls had absorbed years of suffering. The shelves were still lined with dusty jars and strange objects, but something had changed. A feeling of being watched settled over Marco, and he couldn't shake the idea that he wasn't alone in the basement. His eyes were drawn to a new object on the table. A large, dark wooden box, tucked away beneath the scattered medical tools. The box wasn't mentioned in the diary. It was entirely new, and Marco felt an almost magnetic pull to it. He hesitated for a moment, then reached for the box. As his fingers brushed against the cold wood, a jolt of electricity ran through him, sending a shiver down his spine. Opening the box, he found a collection of old photographs, each one yellowed with age. The faces of the people in the pictures were mostly unfamiliar, but one image caught his attention immediately. It was a photo of a young woman, standing in front of the same house he was now exploring. Her face was hauntingly familiar, and her expression, half smiling, half somber, sent a chill through him. The woman was holding a baby, but the baby's face was obscured, as if someone had deliberately scratched it out. The back of the photo was scrawled with a single word, Margaret. Marco's pulse quickened. The name was the same as the diarist, but this woman in the photo couldn't have been her, could she? The thought of it sent waves of dread through him, but his curiosity only deepened. Suddenly, he heard a faint creak from the stairs. He spun around, heart pounding in his chest. His breath caught when he saw the silhouette of a figure at the top of the stairs. A woman, standing motionless in the shadows, her form barely discernible against the dim light. Marco's first instinct was to call out, but the words caught in his throat. The figure stepped forward, revealing a face he would never forget, a face he'd seen only in the photographs. It was Margaret, or at least it looked like her. The same eyes, the same unsettling smile, but something was different. Her expression was cold, as if she had been waiting for him all along. She didn't say a word as she stepped into the basement, her footsteps unnervingly silent. Marco froze, unsure whether he should run or confront her. The air around him thickened, and he felt the weight of 1,000 eyes bearing down on him, as if the very walls were alive, watching him, judging him. "Who are you?" Marco finally managed to ask, his voice barely a whisper. Margaret didn't respond immediately. Instead, she walked slowly toward the table, her eyes gliding over the scattered items as if assessing them. She paused when she reached the box, her fingers brushing against the photographs inside. "It's been so long," she murmured almost to herself. "So long since anyone discovered the truth." Her voice was soft, but it carried a chilling weight that seemed to resonate within Marco's bones. He was too stunned to speak, his mind racing to make sense of what was happening. "Do you know what happens when you open the door?" she continued, her eyes locking with his. "Do you know what's waiting on the other side?" Marco didn't respond. He couldn't. He didn't want to know what she meant, but he was too far gone now, and he had to find out. Margaret took a step closer to him, her face inches from his. Her breath was cold, and he could see her smile widen, but it wasn't kind. It was something darker, something predatory. "You think you've stumbled upon a simple mystery, but it's much more than that," she whispered. "You're part of it now. You've always been part of it." Before Marco could react, the ground beneath him seemed to tremble. The walls of the basement creaked and groaned, as though something was awakening. Something ancient, something that had been lying dormant for far too long. The dim lights flickered, and the temperature dropped so suddenly Marco's breath turned to mist. Suddenly, the diary, he had left it on the table, began to glow with an unnatural light. The pages fluttered open on their own, as though drawn by some unseen force. The words in the diary began to shift, the ink running and reforming in real time, revealing new entries, new confessions. The handwriting was no longer the delicate, precise style it had been earlier. It had become jagged, frantic, rushed. "I'm sorry. I had to open the door. I thought I could control it, but now it's too late. I can hear them in the walls. I can hear them breathing. They want me to join them. I don't know what's worse, what they'll do to me or what they'll do to you when you find this. I was only trying to protect the others. But now it's too late." The last words were smeared in black ink, almost unreadable, as though someone had frantically tried to blot them out. But it was clear enough. The door that had been opened. Margaret stepped back, her smile turning into something twisted, her eyes glowing with a dark satisfaction. "You opened it," she said softly. "Now, it's your turn to face what's behind the door." Suddenly, the shadows in the basement seemed to shift and writhe, taking on forms, outlines of figures that moved toward Marco. They were not human. No, they were something else. Something that had been bound to the house for generations. Something that had been waiting. The temperature dropped to a point where Marco could see his breath freezing in front of him, the chill penetrating deep into his bones. He felt the shadows closing in, encircling him, their whispers filling the room. The walls of the basement seemed to pulse with the sound, each thump like the beat of a heart, drawing him further into the darkness. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, everything stopped. The room went silent. The shadows receded. The diary lay still on the table. But Marco's mind was no longer his own. The faces, the whispers, the darkness. It all consumed him. He couldn't move. He couldn't speak. Margaret was gone, leaving him alone in the basement. But her presence lingered, an indelible mark on his soul. The next morning, Marco was found standing motionless by the house, staring into the distance, his eyes wide and unblinking. He had no memory of the night before, no recollection of what had transpired in the basement. But he would never be the same. And the house stood there waiting. The shadows never fully dissipated, and the whispers never ceased. Hollow Creek would never forget the forgotten discovery, and the dark door that once stood open. Never forget, some secrets, once uncovered, can entangle us in a dark and inescapable web of mystery, forever altering our perception of reality. And curiosity, when pushed too far, can lead to uncovering truths that were never meant to be discovered. If you loved this story and crave more, like, subscribe, and share, so you never miss our chilling true crime tales, haunting mysteries, and murder stories.